Are you playing with Nut's tail? Huh? You see it? Oh yeah, he's got such a nice tail, huh? Look at that nice tail.
The first time I let Nuts and Cheeto meet, I was honestly nervous. I stayed right there the whole time, ready to step in if anything went wrong. I mean, it's not every day you see a baby squirrel and a kitten face to face. In my head, I kept thinking, okay, if Cheeto gets too rough, I'm picking him up immediately. But then, something happened that completely caught me off guard. Instead of acting possessive or overly excited, Cheeto leaned in and started licking Nuts' fur like he was one of his own siblings. And Nuts just sat there with this confused little expression like, "Buddy, what exactly are you doing right now?" I started laughing the second I saw it. From that moment on, the two of them just kept getting closer. Nuts would play with Cheeto, curl up beside him, and let him groom his fur like it was the most normal thing in the world. Cheeto was obsessed with Nuts' fluffy tail, and Nuts seemed to enjoy every bit of the attention. The funny thing is, none of this was ever part of the plan. I've never really been a cat person. I've always had big dogs, that's what I know. But a couple of months before Nuts came into our lives, my wife and I went to meet a little orange kitten named Cheeto, and I fell for him instantly. He was only about 9 weeks old, and at the time, we already had Ruger, our older family dog.
Chill. And, oh, you gotta make a move. Why are you hissing?
Ruger is basically a grumpy old man these days, so I was pretty worried about how he'd react to a tiny kitten bouncing around the house. The first day we brought Cheeto home, I introduced them very carefully. But before I could even react, Cheeto marched right up to Ruger like he didn't have a single fear in the world. Ruger barely cared, he just gave him one look and went right back to minding his own business.
Here we go for the move. There we go. Good boy, Ruger. There you go. Okay.
So we decided to let things happen slowly. We put Ruger in his room for a bit and let Cheeto hang out with the family. But later that night, I suddenly realized I couldn't find Cheeto anywhere. I searched the whole house, called his name, checked every spot I could think of, nothing. Then I walked into Ruger's room and just stopped. Cheeto was curled up, asleep, right behind Ruger, like they'd known each other forever. Ruger looked a little confused about the whole situation, but he allowed it. And from that moment on, I started seeing the two of them slowly get more comfortable with each other. Then, just as our little family was settling into this new rhythm, Nuts showed up. One day, I was out walking Ruger when I looked down and saw this tiny squirrel shaking on the ground. He was so small it made my heart drop.
Yeah, laying flat like that.
And somehow, he actually walked right into my hand. Even now, I can't fully explain what that felt like, but in that moment, it honestly felt like Nuts chose me. Like somehow he had decided I was going to be his person. I brought him home, held him close, and from that second on, I knew I was going to do everything I could to save him.
Well, a squirrel just walked into my hand. Hey, buddy, it's okay. Are you okay?
The next day, I went back to the same spot to see if there were any other squirrels around, maybe a nest, maybe his mother, maybe at least some clue about where he had come from, but I found nothing. So I did what I always do when I'm way out of my depth. I went online and started learning everything I could about squirrels, how to feed them, how to help them grow, how to rehab and care for them the right way. Nuts was hungry all the time. He was tiny, fragile, and completely dependent on me. In those first days, I spent almost every minute feeding him, watching him, checking on him, just hoping I could get him through the most dangerous stage. And during all of that, the very first animal in the house who seemed to accept Nuts was Cheeto. At night, Cheeto would sit right outside Nuts' little setup and just stare at him. Sometimes he'd gently reach a paw toward the cage like he was trying to figure out how to invite Nuts to play. It wasn't aggression at all, it was curiosity, completely harmless curiosity. Before long, they were chasing each other all over the house, wrestling in their own weird little way, and somehow, even though they were completely different animals, they just clicked. I think a big part of it was the stage of life they met in. They were both so young, everything in the world was still new, and instead of seeing each other as something strange, they just saw a friend. But no matter how much I loved Nuts, I never forgot one very important thing. He was a wild animal. I didn't want to keep him forever as a pet. From the very beginning, the goal was always to help him heal, grow strong, and eventually go back to where he belonged outside, up in the trees. So when the time finally felt right, I built him a little house and attached it to a tree. I still remember placing Nuts inside and saying, "All right, buddy, this is your new home." He jumped right in, and I just stood there thinking, okay, I think he likes it. And as hard as it was, I knew it was the right thing to do. Every time I saw Nuts climbing higher, moving faster, and looking more and more like a wild squirrel, I felt this deep sense of peace. He was becoming exactly who he was meant to be, and while Nuts was learning how to live out in the world, something beautiful was still happening back at home. Cheeto and Ruger had grown close too. By then, they had become their own little best friend duo, just like Cheeto and Nuts had been. And honestly, when I look back on all of it, I think that's what I love most about this story. None of them cared that one was a squirrel, one was a kitten, and one was an old dog. The only thing that seemed to matter to them was that they weren't alone,